All right. Hi, and welcome. It's Shelley Karpati, writer and host of the Spicy Soul Mama podcast. On this show, we delve into how we connect to our spiritual lives for authentic living. I'm bringing authentic, sometimes raw and compassionate conversations for insights to our universal truths and what is required to heal ourselves and the world around us. In a world that often feels chaotic and overwhelming, it is my hope that these conversations will spark some curiosity and plant some tiny seeds of awareness so that might all collectively learn, grow, and remember our humanity and interconnectedness. And don't forget to find me on Substack to subscribe for updates at Spicy Soul Mama. Welcome to the Spicy Soul Mama, Jennifer Leigh Selig. I'm so happy to have you here. And let me tell you, listener, a little bit about Jennifer. She is a lifelong educator with 36 years of classroom experience teaching in the fields of literature, psychology, creative studies, the humanities, and in the last decade, her focus has been on teaching memoir writing. She's also a prolific author with too many publishing credits to mention, but I'll just mention her two. Her most recent book is Deep Memoir, an archetypal approach to deepen your story and broaden its appeal, which is a companion to her co-written Nautilus Gold award-winning book, Deep Creativity, 7 Ways to Spark Your Creative Spirit. She also teaches courses on deep vocation and deep longing. So you can sense the theme here with the word deep, which comes from her doctoral degree in in-depth psychology. So welcome to the Spicy Soul Mama podcast, Jennifer. It's so great to have you.
Thank you, Shelley. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. So just to tell people, we met because I was running a book club in my writing community, a writing room, on the deep memoir archetypal approach to deepen your story and broaden its appeal, which for other people that are writing memoir. So, and I told you about it, and you were so excited, and you came on, and it was wonderful to interview you with writers and writers' questions, and so it's just kind of was the catapult to our connection and friendship. So I really do appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Shelley. I mean, I have to just say that was a really geeky moment for me because I've never been read in a book club before. So I was like, oh my God, people are reading my book. I want to come look at the people who are reading my book. So it was really exciting for me to be there. And you're such a great interviewer. So thank you.
Yeah, oh, that's so great. Thank you. So I thought that because of the this theme of being deep and deep thinkers and as writers are, what brought you to this path of teaching and this deep psychological inquiry?
Oh, so I have to think about where to start. I might have come out of the womb wanting to teach my mother something. So I think I have always been a teacher. When I was a kid, I was that one who wanted to come home from school and then play school. And I would be the teacher, which did not engender me a lot of friends. No more school. But
Yeah.
you know, I'd like line my dolls up and teach them. And then when I had a sister when I was 7 years old, I'm like, yay, my first real student, you know. So so I've always been a teacher, and I really consider myself vocationally blessed in that sense to know what I wanted to do from an early age. And I have, been teaching my entire life. So officially, when I was 24, I started teaching high school English and literature. I did that for 16 years, and then I got I got really burned out, not by the students, because the students were wonderful, but by the policies of the No Child Left Behind in the Bush administration, which took
Mhm.
all my joy out of teaching, all my creativity out of it. So
Mm,
I
mm,
decided to go and get a PhD and teach at the, university level.
mhm,
So
mhm,
I got a PhD in depth psychology and taught at a university teaching research and writing for a number of years, and then blew my academic brain out. So decided I wanted to come back to my love for literature and teach story again and come back to memoir. So that's kind of the arc of 36 years of teaching.
That's amazing. And so you must really develop some really strong relationships with your students, and because you're reading their heartfelt words of their life experiences, you must really feel like, yeah, what is that like? You know, having all these different students through the years and reading their people's like lives and their writing.
Yeah, I really appreciated something I read on your one of your Substack pieces about you had written about love, this idea of love. And for me, being a teacher is about loving my students, about caring for them, about contributing to their healing and their wholeness, to mothering them in some way.
Mhm.
I always wanted to be a mother and I wasn't blessed with that opportunity, but to be able to, you know, foster their growth and their becoming. And so teaching as a spiritual path and teaching as a nurturing path and teaching as an awakening path have
Mhm.
all been part of this for me, whether I'm teaching literature or psychology or academic research or, you know, I do various other courses as well. So it's kind of all makes sense to me.
Yeah, it all seems to it all like is interchanging, like and interconnected. You know, it's like you've become a lot of your students like a mama bear, I would imagine. And I'm sure that you've really impacted their students' lives in that way.
Well,
Um,
that's it's
yeah.
funny you say that because I started teaching high school when I was 24. So to imagine myself as a mama bear for 18-year-olds, I mean, I didn't quite see myself in that way at that time, but I definitely grew into that. And then, you know, now as a memoir teacher in the communities that I lead, you know, I have people who are a decade or 2 decades older than me who still consider me a mama bear. So that archetype of the mother, you know, isn't about age and it isn't about
No.
biology. It's really about, you know, the caring, welcome, open heart. So
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, I
that's
hear
so
you
what
say
how wonderful. Yeah, because it then it creates a really a safe place for healing and exploration and curiosity.
yes.
You know, it's really it's so wonderful to be around other writers that want to do that introspection, because there's no one way for, you know, one path for healing. Do you find that a lot of the writers that you're working with in your classes, are they you know, is there a trajectory of like healing, and how do we what is maybe we can talk about the therapeutic nature of creativity and how that is reflected in your teaching memoir.
Hmm. It's reflected in everything I teach. I think this idea of the therapeutic nature of creativity. If you define therapy, I mean, it depends on how you define therapy. So if you define therapy as a pathway to healing and a pathway to wholeness, then everything that's all what I'm about. Like
Mhm.
let's do that. Let's do that, whether we're studying Shakespeare or whether we're doing our own writing or whatever we're studying. But that's where I want to go and it's my intention. And so, you know, I don't think of myself as a therapist. You know, I have a PhD in psychology, but it's not a licensure degree. So I don't
Mhm.
think of myself that way, but I think of the work I do as therapeutic. And I think of, and I know you do too, that creativity is therapeutic.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
it just is. Sometimes it wounds us before it heals us.
Mhm.
Sometimes it breaks us open. But ultimately, you know, I find it to be really therapeutic.
Yeah, I don't think that there's one, yeah, path for healing. You know, I feel that we're, and we've talked about this a little bit, there's always this like, um, you know, trajectory of going on many different journeys of healing because it's so not linear. And maybe we complete one cycle of healing and then it makes us realize, like, you know, one of my teachers would always say, Ram Dass would say, like, you think you're enlightened, you think you're done healing, go hang out with your family. So, because they know exactly where you haven't done your healing and they will show
Right,
you. So,
right, right.
so it's it must be really you must really have to set the framework and the boundaries in your while you're teaching, and holding them with compassion at the same time. I mean, that's just a really beautiful and I would imagine challenging place to be sometimes, and holding space when they're getting to some very difficult topics.
For sure, in memoir writing, which has been,
Hmm.
what I've been doing for almost the last decade, most of my students come to me with a trauma story.
Hmm.
Oh, or at least in the arc of the story they're telling, there's trauma in the arc. Like I'm
Hmm.
I'm not blessed with humorous memoirists for the most. Maybe 1 in 30 students comes to write a funny story, but even that is tethered in some way to some trauma. So it's a challenging environment for sure um to hold people's trauma stories. And I think, my partner's a therapist, so we often talk about the work we do. And she sees people one-on-one, and I see people in community. And, as I said, I don't see myself as a therapist necessarily, but the work we do is really similar in that sense, is of holding people's stories and listening to people's stories. Um, so the difference, I think, for the work that she does and the work that I do is there's also this added component of you're writing your trauma story. So I'm
Hmm.
a writing teacher and I'm holding a trauma story. And that's a delicate balance to hold, which is
Hmm.
why I tell my students, and I say this in my book, Deep Memoir, is we're not going to be in the archetype of the critic. Because if you're writing a trauma story and you're already nervous about your writing or not confident in your story, and we move into the critic too soon, we're going to shut the writing down. And it's
Yes.
difficult, right? When you're writing your trauma story, to have someone critique it,
Mm.
because it's almost like they're critiquing your story or your lived experience, or why did you do it that way, or that's not believable. And so I'm really careful, at least in my beginning memoir writing classes, to really separate the critic and the what I call the witness, someone who's just witnessing and holding your story, from each other.
Oh,
Because
that is a
yeah.
very delicate balance for sure. I mean, you said a couple of things that it's for me in writing my own. I've been avoiding writing it, frankly, because of those times. But um, I love how you talk about, like, maybe we could talk a little bit about what does archetype mean exactly, and how do we know what archetype we're in?
Yeah, it's a good and rich question, and I write about that a lot in Deep Memoir. So I just think the simplest way to define an archetype is it's just a universal pattern in our psyches. It's kind of like we're hardwired to think about these sort of patterns. So when we see someone on the street offering nurturing to someone else, we recognize, like, that's a mother or a nurturer. We recognize that, right? Doesn't matter the content. There's like 100 ways to nurture. There's way more than that. So, but we say, oh, that's nurturing, or that's mothering, or that's teaching, or that's mentoring. So I think we kind of come into this world to recognize those particular patterns.
Mhm.
So that's how I really define an archetype, is these patterns that we can recognize.
Nice. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And do people, when they're writing, is it helpful for them to identify their archetype?
I think it's helpful for everyone to identify where they're standing, for and writers definitely, but for a couple of reasons, which is that, um, first of all, it helps you feel not so alone, to know
Mhm.
that this is something universal. This is something, like in trauma stories, when we talk in trauma about this experience of descending into the underworld and then ascending back out of the underworld. That's a mythological pattern. It's in the story of Jesus and the resurrection. It's all over the place from time eternal, this idea of the descent and the ascent, right?
Mhm.
So knowing that when you get that cancer diagnosis, or you get that phone call that someone, that just died, you're going through a pattern that's been gone through by people across cultures, across time periods, back then and in the future, here, now, and always. So I think that's helpful, to feel like you're in a community it's part of our shared humanity to go through
Yes.
these experiences. So to identify the pattern that you're in, and then to look for people who maybe are a little bit further ahead in the pattern for how they broke that pattern, to
Mhm.
feel this hopefulness that you can get out of the pattern or you can stay in the pattern if you like it. I think that that's super useful in terms of connecting us to, again, our common humanity.
I love that so much, and that's so much what I love talking about and exploring and
Yeah.
helping, just connecting on those universal truths. And, I just remember one of my teachers when we were going through the pandemic, and he would say, like, we've been here before. We've all been here as a collective here before. In the plague of the
Right.
1918 or whatever it was, and we survived, and we will do it, and we will survive again.
Yeah.
And also, so it's like on a global collective scale, this hero's journey that we're all on, and also like individually. And so it is really helpful. I think you're right to recognize that other people's stories, how they are in parallel. Like I definitely have some, other people that have a very parallel story to mine, but I think what makes it unique that you must draw out on people in their writing is it is still a unique experience to them, right? So how they tell this story to show people, yes, this is a universal thing that you probably or may have gone through because you picked up my writing, and
Mhm.
this is how I overcame it. So let me help you, maybe.
Yes, and that's why I say one of the things that my memoir students face is this question of, um, does the world need another memoir about addiction? Does it need another cancer survival memoir? And yes, they've all been done. I mean, it's all been done
Mhm.
before, but no one has the same exact story as you. And so I love that you bring up the pandemic because it's really true. And one of the things that I like to ask people is, tell me your pandemic story. We all went through the pandemic and we all went through it differently. And I
Yes.
also love when I go out with couples, and with my partner, I love to say, tell us your falling in love story and we'll tell you ours, right? Because
Oh,
falling in
yeah.
love is so universal, but the stories are all incredibly unique, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's the beautiful thing. And it's kind of this intersection, I think, between the universal and the particular that I'm super interested in as a depth psychologist.
That's so wonderful. And just like, I love reading about people's human experiences, because I think that's why I love reading stories. Well, because of your book, actually, I started reading a lot more memoirs. I wasn't really reading that many memoirs. And I furiously read this whole summer. I read like three or four. You have such a wealth of, memoir books in the back of your book of suggested reading. And
Yeah.
can I tell you the books I read this summer? Because
Yeah, please.
so I read Somebody's Daughter
Okay,
by
love
Ashley C. Clark. Yeah,
Ashley C.
amazing.
Ford. Yeah.
Yes, Ashley C. Ford.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, yes.
Um, and I read Maggie Smith's "You Could Make This Place Beautiful," which was such a unique memoir, which I know everybody loves it and has talked about it, but it really is. Well, Ashley's was very unique, of course, because I never read anything like that before. And Ashley, how she overcame so much. I loved reading how she overcame not knowing her father for most of her life, and then and dealing with a mom that was really challenging, but there was so much love there. Listeners, go get Somebody's Daughter. And also, Maggie Smith's book was written in vignettes. That was a very new way to read memoir. Some of her chapters were only like three sentences.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah,
So,
I love the creativity of that particular book. So, Ashley C. Ford's book is much more a traditional memoir where it's chronological, although
mhm.
it opens at the ending, but then it goes back to tell the whole story building up to the ending. And then Maggie Smith, as you said, was a very different memoir in the sense that it's just told in these little snippets and these little creative snapshots. And so the genre of memoir and really creativity in general is expanded, beyond traditional forms. So even yesterday I was listening to a podcast where they were talking about a composition by the jazz musician John Cage, where it was 3.5 minutes of silence because he just wanted people in the music to listen to the silence in the auditorium. So, so creativity is really expanded beyond the boundaries of what we know. And I love that.
That's I love that too. That's really powerful. I've experienced being I do some spiritual chanting in the Hindu tradition with one of my teachers, and whenever we're together, after we're done, we're raising the roof. We're like, it's all this amazing energy, and then there's silence
Mm.
afterwards. And sometimes people clap, and I'm like, no, don't clap.
Let's listen to
So
the silence. Yeah.
yeah, the silence is really amazing,
Yeah.
and healing just in the same.
Yeah.
But in any case, what in it was so interesting to compare those two memoirs because they're both so yeah, they are both so unique. And what I found myself in each of them. So I found myself like as a daughter, like Ashley as a daughter in that one, and I found myself like in Maggie, I found myself as a wife and mother. So it was just when if people read this genre, I think that it really brings not to say that other types of fiction doesn't do that as well. However, there's something about reading a true story as someone has experienced it, because right, because the way that I tell my story may not suit. So I'm blending two questions, but I guess I just want to say that it's just really wonderful to it's important, I think, to read memoir and to witness and reading other people's lives.
Yeah. Well, what I love about memoir, and you're touching on that in this really great way, is that fiction hits on the same archetypes. It hits on the same story patterns. You can have fiction about falling in love, and you can read a memoir about falling in love, right? But the memoir about falling in love is a true story, and you're connecting to the author as the person who had that experience. And so there's a way that you're drawn closer to the author and connecting with the author more than you're maybe necessarily connecting in fiction, where it's like fiction is the I just find that for myself, and it's why I'm super addicted to memoir. I thought after I finished my book, and I reference 140 memoirs in my book, and that's not suggested reading, that's just what I referenced in the book. So there's a
Amazing.
lot more I didn't reference. But
Yeah.
I was like, okay, now maybe I can do something else, but I keep buying more memoirs. I'm reading more memoirs because I'm so fascinated by the human condition as
Yeah.
it's lived and the wisdom each person has, through their life story to offer the rest of us. And it's really moving to me.
Yeah. Oh, that's so nice. Yeah, I had to take a break from reading memoir because I actually, and I'm wondering if this ever happens for your students. So I was reading a book in the similar genre of what I would be writing about my son and his lives with mental illness. And
Mm.
I so I was reading a book, and it's, of course it's well written and of course it's wonderful, but I'm reading a book of similar experience of a mother with her son. And um, after the first chapter, I couldn't read it. I
Mm.
just like it was too close to home. And I just had to like put it away. Like I can't read anything that's so specific around motherhood and mental illness, like with a child. Like it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
So any
Well,
advice on that?
no, I would just say, Shelley, that I think I would just add a word to that, which is it just doesn't work for you now.
Yeah,
In the
now.
place where you're at now. 20 years from now, you may collect all of them and read them and take great solace in them, and your book may be on the shelf next to each one of those, right?
Mhm.
So, but right now, there's a tenderness in your heart or your soul or your spirit that has you be like, this is not the story for me.
Yeah.
I think we all do that. Like, we all have sensitivities in certain areas where like I can't watch a lot of violence on television.
Mhm.
I can't do that. And
Yeah.
so it's not because of violence in my past, it's just a sensitivity. And I know you've identified as a highly sensitive person. And so,
Yes.
right, you just
Same.
sometimes you just need to know where you're at. And some of my memoir writers, if they're writing a mother-daughter memoir, they can't read any mother-daughter memoirs while they're writing it, and others
Mhm.
wanna read them all. So I
Mm,
think it's just
mhm.
really noticing our body's response. If our body says no, wants to put the book down, wants to slam the pages shut, is feeling our nervous system,
Mhm.
and, reacting to that. It's just not the book for us right now.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for that validation. I really
Yeah, for
appreciate it.
sure.
Yeah. So do you and in your book you so I'd love to go back into like craft more of the craft. In your book Deep Memoir, you write about the 7 stages of this underworld journey, which I feel like as a collective we're kind of in right now as a side note. Um and in you write about this, that again, this like we've touched upon this connection between creativity and suffering and so the personal and cultural underworld journeys we go through, maybe how is yeah, do you think that we're in this a deep underworld right now post-election? If we can just not talk specific politics, but just in general of
Right.
like what the collective is going through.
Exactly. Well, I've been doing several workshops and speaking at different venues about these 7 stages of the underworld. And let me just back up and say where I came up with that, and then I'll come
Yeah.
into your question. So I because most of my memoir students are writing about trauma, I wanted to see if there was sort of a map of the trauma journey, which is, a shorthand for that is the underworld journey, which is a kind of a more mythological term where we go into the underworld, which is the world of shadow, the world of suffering, the world of grief. We wrestle with it down at the bottom of the hole or the pit, and then, in a hopefully we come back out of it again into the upper world, which doesn't always happen, but hopefully we do that. And
Hmm.
so, because so many of my students were writing about that, I wanted to kind of create a map or a topography, like what are the stations on the underworld journey? And I was thinking about, and you brought up earlier, Joseph Campbell on the hero's journey,
Hmm.
and then my colleague Maureen Murdoch, who did the heroine's journey. So I was like, can I do something like that for the underworld journey? So I went and I read a ton of myths about the underworld journey, and I looked for kind of the patterns within, because it's the archetypal world is again all about the patterning. And so
Mm.
I noticed I started to compile these stages, and then I went and looked at all the memoirs I had read of the underworld journey and mapped those out. And so I came up with 7 stages, and they're not linear. We can be in multiple stages at one time, but there is an arc of a journey inside of there. And I wrote about that in Deep Memoir, and I've been sharing about that. And it applies both on a personal level and a collective level, because as a collective, we can go into the underworld. Now,
Yes.
I think we did that during the pandemic, right? So we
Yes.
all went into the underworld during the pandemic.
Hmm.
It was, I have some people who said it was good for them because they
Uh-huh.
were introverts and got to stay home and be introverted and not feel guilty. But for the most part, it was just really a pretty shitty time for all of us.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
Now, right now, post-election, and we're just recording this a little over a week after the election results, some of us are
Yes.
in the underworld and some of us are in the upper world,
It's true.
right? So it's not a collective experience. Had
Yes.
the election flipped the other way, other people would be in underworld and people would be in the upper world. So I think we
Yes.
need to be conscious of maybe our tribe, if we're tribalism about our politics, our tribe
Mm.
might be underworld or upper world. And so,
Yes.
but even understanding whatever side you're on, and if you're on the side where this is an underworld journey, looking at those stages and how you're feeling there can help normalize the experience.
Yes.
Right. And that's what I love about looking at stages. It's like, so one of the stages I have is called Lost and Wandering, where you're
Uh-huh.
just what the heck just happened? You're spinning around in circles. You can't understand. I think this is, a lot of people are going through this. You can't understand what happened. You're, you're just walking around your house or your community like a zombie,
Yeah.
confused. That's a
Yes.
stage that is talked about in mythology. It's talked about in religion. It's there. So when
Yes.
you know that, you don't feel so alone. I'm
Yes.
going through an experience that's very similar to what other people go through in the underworld experience.
Yeah.
So,
What is there a particular like which story in the in mythology like is the wandering? Is I mean I only think of Odysseus in the Odyssey of him wandering, but are there other ones, other stories that we could relate our journey right now being lost for people that are in the underworld?
There's a myth of the myth of Demeter and Persephone,
Oh, yes.
right? The mother-daughter myth, where
Yes.
Demeter, after her daughter Persephone is abducted into the underworld. She's raped, abducted into the underworld, and her mother heart is so heartbroken that she just wanders for a period of time.
Yes.
She doesn't know how to find her daughter. She doesn't know what to do. She scorches the earth. That's a stage in an underworld journey, and she comes out of it as you know. Hopefully, we all do from the underworld, but that's a particular one. You can think of Jesus in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, right? Like
Right.
what's happening here, right? So
Yeah.
there's mythological stories that will track that.
That's really helpful. I really I love the 7 stages that you have that you talk about, and reading, learning the different examples because it just really it solidifies it visually for me and mentally. So people that are from this post-election, if they're in the upper world. So what is what tell me a little bit about what that feels like and what is a like what's a parallel story to that?
Mm, okay, I haven't thought about this before, if there's a parallel story to that. But it would be probably any myth where a battle is fought and won, and you're on the
Mhm.
side of the warriors who won. So if we think
Yeah,
about the election is about losing and winning.
right.
Right? So it's a warrior archetype. You're fighting a battle, you're fighting to win or to lose, you're fighting to annihilate your opponent.
Yeah.
So any myth where you can look at the joy, the joy or the victory of the conquerors or of the winners of that is really would really be the celebration of the victory.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and so here we are as a collective, we're living in 2 different worlds, depending on which side you feel like you're like, I love how you put like the tribalism of which side you feel like you're in. And for me, I've made a conscious choice that I'm going to just be neutral and be the witness to what everything that's happening. And I don't know if that's just simply to protect, part of it is to simply protect my heart and
Yes.
also to just realize that I have no control over everything that's happening before me, and that I have to learn that lesson in so many different ways again and again.
Yeah. Well, Shelley, that's my first stage of the underworld journey.
Yeah.
I called love's failure against death. And
Hmm.
there's a reason it's tied to a myth that I call it that, but it's like no matter how much you love your country,
Hmm.
how much you loved the politician you wanted to win, there's nothing you can do.
Right.
If
Right.
you're a Kamala supporter, she lost. As
Right.
much money as you sent her, as much love as you sent her, she's lost. Like sometimes we just have to realize we're out of control and we can't
Yes.
do anything. And we don't like that.
Yeah, it's
We
really
don't we don't
hard.
like that, and that can plunge us into the underworld for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And I would also say when you talk about being neutral, that I think an archetypal approach can help with that.
Hmm.
Because one of the things that I've learned is, when I think about this election, I think, Kamala Harris was offering us the option of a kind of a joyous warrior. That's what she was
Hmm.
trying to be, right? Joyous, bring joy to the fight. And Donald Trump was offering us the aggrieved warrior
Hmm.
to bring your grievances to the fight. And the
Hmm.
country got to choose. Are you feeling joy? Are you feeling, aggrieved? And
Yes.
majority of people said, not by a ton, but by a significant amount, I'm aggrieved. So I'm
Yeah.
going to choose the aggrieved warrior. And that helps me to separate the person from the archetype, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Right. So it's just a
That's
useful perspective for seeing the bigger picture. And like you use the word witness, which I love, like just witnessing, like, oh, that's what they did. That's what this side, I mean, that's okay.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's just it doesn't have to, and then, remembering it's so interesting and then remembering, okay, what is real and true right in front of me?
Mhm.
And what's real and true in front of me is that we're having an exchange, we're enjoying each other's company, we're, sitting in our safe rooms and where we're residing, and we have water and all the getting back to really all the wonderful things that that we have in our small worlds, in our lives. So
Right, right,
yeah.
right. Yeah, and if you can't control those things, the big things, you know, you do what you can control. So I know for me, my love language is acts of service. So
Hmm.
as soon as I found out about the election results, I'm like, okay, acts of service. So I found a place to volunteer and spend my time. And it's
Hmm.
not political by any
Yeah.
means. It's just loving the people in my community because
Hmm.
that's what I can do.
Yes.
And you know, the what I can control is my own response to what's happening around me. And,
Yeah.
you know, knowing even the love languages are archetypal in that sense. So
Yeah.
knowing that's my love language, right?
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's so important. It is what we need right now is just acts of service for sure in our small communities. And it sounds like you've done a lot of really wonderful, inner work yourself. And you obviously have a beautiful, like, spiritual practice, whether that's, being in service and being, in service to your students as well. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing next and where are you teaching? Where can we be in
Yeah.
touch and interact with you?
Thank you. Thank you for that. Well, I love meeting you through a writer's room. I really, since I wrote this book, I'm looking to kind of expand my reach and connect with more people in the writing and the creative community. And so I'm kind of all over the place. I'm on my website for sure, which is jenniferleeselig.com. And you can find the courses that I'm teaching there and get on my mailing list if that's interesting. I'm working with a writer's room. I travel around the country doing various gigs, particularly now when we're kind of back in person,
Hmm.
different conferences, etc. So kind of a
Yeah.
little bit all over the place and definitely still on Zoom since the pandemic, even though I miss teaching in person very much.
Hmm.
Yeah, so
Okay, great. Yeah. And so I just would like to tell our audience again to find you at Jennifer Lee Selig, and it's Jenna, I'll spell it out. It's Jennifer, Lee, Leigh, Selig, Selig.com. And so she offers, again, go find her, and she offers memoir writing, spiritual writing, vocation, and longing, and they're all accessed through her website. So thank you so much for being here. And I really hope that I look forward to interacting with you again. I'm
I
sure.
know Shelley's been great.
All
Yeah,
right. Well,
so much.
thank you.